Okay, some of you are wondering, why is a city guy talking to a water conference? I have to admit, I had that question myself when I was first approached about this event. But it was right there in the title. It says, our watershed, our community. So maybe I'm going to talk more about the community. There's going to be certainly a lot of people who are going to talk a lot more about watersheds, and there's people who obviously know a lot more about watersheds than I do. But maybe I can give you a different perspective on the nature of the community that all of you serve and all of you actually live in. So I think this is going to be sort of an interesting opportunity because it allowed me to sort of rethink my own material in terms of how it might relate to the folks who do the important work that you guys do. So bear that in mind. And as was said, whenever I might say the word city, I am really talking about cities, towns, villages, communities. All right? So there is that. So let's start with a story. And this story begins in Durham, North Carolina. It's March 2012, and there's a wedding in Durham, North Carolina. And like most weddings, there's brides and grooms and flowers and tuxedos. There's cake. However, unlike most weddings, there are 1,600 brides and grooms. And they're not marrying each other. They're marrying the city of Durham. In what was described as the largest civic union in history, these 1,600 people got up in front of their friends and neighbors, and they pledged their oath of love and fealty to the city. And the oath included things like a promise to keep the streets clean and safe, to protect the environment, support local government, buy locally, protect the environment. Very cool. Now this is the kind of thing it sounds like maybe a Chamber of Commerce might have been behind, or maybe the city themselves. But this story actually begins with one woman, and the story goes, this woman really loves Durham. And apparently someone once snarkily said to her, it's like, well, if you love it so much, why don't you marry it? It's like, okay, good idea. Hence, Mary Durham is born. What Mary Durham really underscores is the fundamental fact that we are in a relationship with our places. But most of us never think about that relationship. You know, we have these highly examined personal and professional relationships. We spend lots of time grinding on those. But when was the last time you stopped and thought about the relationship that you have with your city? Probably not often, if ever. And an unexamined relationship can go bad, it can go stale. So A, let's recognize we are in this relationship, and B, then we might start modeling our behavior, because a relationship implies a two-way street. It's not just about what our communities do for us, but it's what we as citizens can potentially do for our communities as well. So I ask the question of people as I travel around, do you love your city? Do you love your community? Do you love your neighborhood? And I suspect, hopefully you guys do love your communities, your neighborhoods. And we'd like to believe that that would be a commonly held notion. But the sad truth is that not nearly enough of us actually do love our communities. So it is on us, those of us who actually do love a place, we need to be the emotional standard bearers and carry that message out of love out there and help our fellow citizens see and feel the community the way that we do. Because remember this, emotions are contagious. You smile, I smile. You cry, I feel bad. When more people start saying they love your community, more people are going to see it, more people are going to feel it, more people are going to believe it. And maybe we create that virtuous cycle, which is the good things are compounding upon good things, and all of a sudden now people say, hey, have you been to Ames lately? It's like, yeah, there's something going on there. It's like, and you can literally feel it. Now, unfortunately, the nature of most people's relationship with their cities is maybe not quite so nuanced, so well thought out. In fact, it's actually kind of can be reduced down to one thing that I think is near and dear to all of our hearts and is highly symbolic. And most people's nature of their relationship is actually summarized by the pothole. Now, none of us like potholes, right? We as citizens, we will complain to our leaders to fix the potholes. Our leaders will eventually get around to fixing the potholes, right? And this becomes this ongoing song and dance. Well, the sad truth is we can fix every pothole here in Ames, we can fix every pothole in Iowa. And you, the collective citizens, would yawn, stretch, and say, thanks, roads don't suck quite so bad. There's no love for fixing potholes. There's no emotional return on investment for fixing potholes. Not to say we're going to stop fixing the potholes, but I think we can agree that we should aspire to something more. Now here's the tricky part. We as citizens know to complain about the potholes, right, to our leaders. It's pretty obvious. Hole in the road, my car's going to fall into it, somebody really should fix that, all right? But we as citizens don't necessarily know how to ask for other things. Things like beauty and art and great design. That is not in our typical lexicon. So we as thought leaders in a place not only have to listen to what our citizens are going to ask for, and of course they're going to ask for the most basic things. Hey, fix the roads. Make sure the police and fire service arrive when I need them. Make sure the water is safe. Right? That's what they want. But at heart, we know they want something more. And after we've given it to them, they're going to say, man, how the heck did I ever live without this? Right? So as I ask people these questions, I talk to them about what they love in their places. We have to get through this sort of this build to get to that point. It's like, when we think about the nature of our places, we have to start with a threshold. And that minimum threshold to be a working community is you have to be functional and you have to be safe. Now, a few years ago, when city budgets all over the world got cut to the bone, people said, you know what, money's tight. let's make it functional, we make it safe, we paint it battleship gray, we kick it out the door, and that's good enough. No, I don't think so. I don't think even the most fiscally conservative tax hawks amongst us want to live in a merely functional, safe, and battleship gray community, okay? So what could we aspire to? What should we aspire to in our places? Well, how about comfort? Why can't our community be comfortable? How about convivial in the sense that our community actually helps facilitate bringing us together and connecting us with our fellow citizens? Why isn't our community interesting? And maybe even more appropriately, why isn't our community fun? Where's the fun is a perfectly legitimate question that we should be asking a whole heck of a lot more in the context of better placemaking. Now, I'm sure all of you have been involved in some meeting with your team back at the office where you're there, wrestling with some big hairy problem down there in the weeds, right? Maybe you're here at the conference to avoid that meeting back at the office, right? Good on you. But eventually, we will get sucked into that meeting. And the next time you find yourself in that meeting, it'd be interesting if one of you would raise your hand and say, okay, I see what we're doing here, but I got to ask, where's the fun? Because when you ask that question, you change the dynamic in the room and the way people are fundamentally thinking about the problem. You'll ask, where's the fun? And someone might actually look up from their phone. They might smile a little bit and go, yeah, where's the fun? And in that moment, you've opened up the door to the possibility of something beyond a merely technically sufficient solution. Where's the fun? Great question to ask. Now think about this. We've all been involved in all kinds of projects that have all kinds of requirements and specifications, right? When was the last time you ever saw fun as a stated, articulated goal of any project you've ever worked on? Even a project which by its very nature maybe should have been fun. Let's say a park, a playground, something like that. All kinds of environmental, structural, insurance requirements. Not one mentioned the word fun. Well, why not? Why not at least put that out there as an aspiration? And maybe somebody who's in charge of delivering that solution, they might have a pretty good idea of what fun could be in the context of that particular problem if we at least plant the seed, the hope, and maybe even the expectation of something beyond a merely technically sufficient solution. So I would encourage you all, in all the hard science and all the hard work that you do, leave room for that question, because I think you will still get a better answer simply by asking that question. Where's the fun? So as I talk to people about their cities, their communities, I ask them what do they love about their places. And people tell me stories about the things that they really love about their places. And oftentimes these are relatively small things, kind of personal, kind of intimate. And in my book, I liken them to the idea of the handwritten note that goes with the gift. A love note, if you will. And guys, we've learned this lesson. At some point in our life, we gave a gift to our significant other and we forgot to give a card or a note with that gift, right? That was a mistake. Because that card, that note meant something. Since we took a moment, we made it personal, we made it special, and that small thing, that small gesture had an outsized impact on the way they felt about the gift, by extension, the way they felt about us. Small thing, outsized impact. These love notes are things that communities will give to their citizens, and if communities are very lucky, citizens might actually be inclined to give back as well. I got a few examples here for you. This is the Lawn on D in Boston, Massachusetts. And about 3 years ago, the city was trying to activate this 3-acre space that was adjacent to their convention center. And their solution was, for lack of a better description, to create an adult playground there, right? So they bring in the comfy Adirondack chairs and they bring in swings, but not just any kind of swings, they bring in the adult-sized swings, right? Because why should kids have all the fun? And then they started to program the heck out of this space. So now there's wine tastings, there's beer gardens, there's music, there's Zumba, there's dance classes, there's yoga, there's cornhole, and there's giant Jenga, right? By the way, giant Jenga is a spectator sport, right? Because when that thing starts to tilt, you will stop and you will watch. And then when it goes over, you will applaud. So they're trying to activate this space. It's amazing. Now, I think it was kind of smart where they actually put this. Now, it's adjacent to the convention center. So if you're a conventioneer that's in there looking out the window going, man, that looks so much more interesting than the tax class I got to go to back over here. And hopefully, eventually, they find their way out onto the lawn. And the locals, you love knowing that this is happening in the heart of your downtown. In the grand scheme of Boston, this is a small thing, but I suspect it will have a pretty big outsized impact on the way people see and feel about the city as a whole. Small thing, outsized impact. Speaking of small things, how about this? This is Mill Ends Park in Portland, Oregon. And according to Guinness, this is literally the world's smallest official city park. It's not much bigger than a planter there now, right? Now the thing is this has been a park for over 60 years. And the folks there in Portland feel very protective and very proprietary, very proud of this little thing. And the Parks Department actually takes care of this. And they dress it up. It's like, wow, that's kind of awesome. We love that little thing. Yeah, that is very, very cool. So I think this kind of gesture says something. Small thing, outsized impact. Definitely a love note. There. Murals are love notes. I love a good mural, right? This is from St. Petersburg, Florida, where I live. Nikola Tesla. Now, I look at the mural, but I can't paint, right? Most of us probably don't have any artistic talent when it comes to stuff like this. So I look at the mural, I appreciate it, I think it's awesome, but I would call this, there's an emotional distance between me and this mural. I look at it, I appreciate extent of the relationship, right? So some folks in Ludington, Michigan. Ludington is, folks in Michigan, they hold up their hand, they say, where are you from in Michigan? The mid. Ludington's over here on the knuckle. It's on the west coast of Michigan there on Lake Michigan. So about 3 summers ago, they had this ugly downtown wall. And what they did is they commissioned an artist to come in and do sort of a paint-by-numbers outline on the wall. And then over one weekend, they invited the entire community to come down, grab a number, grab a bucket of paint, and go paint your number. The result was this. Now, as art goes, it's not high art, but it is highly interactive public art. It's the kind of public art people have a different relationship with. Because somebody's going to point to that and say, hey, I helped paint that. And we feel very differently about something we have had a hand in the making of. So maybe one of the things we've got to be thinking about here in the context of some of the work that we're doing is how do we allow more of our fellow citizens, non-scientists, non-practitioners, to roll up their sleeves and get a little dirty, to be part of the solution. Because that fundamentally will change the nature of their relationship with whatever outcome we are trying to achieve. And again, I think it means they're going to feel connected to whatever that result actually is, be it a mural, be it a, whatever, something they're trying to build. I don't know, but I think that is an interesting question to ask. How do you allow those citizens to roll their sleeves and get a little dirty? And this one, I had to add this one, because we were talking about stormwater last night. Now, stormwater, pardon me, for most cities, stormwater is kind of one of those boring problems that they have to take care of, but it's not necessarily, it's like, I guess we got to deal with the stormwater, right? And we know how important that actually is. So a few years ago, Lexington, Kentucky, they're having this issue. Now, most cities have this combined sewer system, right? So everything sort of flows into one pipe. So you put up lots of these signs like here, no dumping. You don't want people throwing trash in the sewers. I get that. Every city is kind of dealing with some version of this. So what Lexington did was kind of interesting. They hired an artist to come in and do sort of to paint some of the storm drains, right? With the whole idea of this. It's right there. Made you look, storm drain awareness, right? Now, for most cities, this is a boring problem, but this is kind of a creative solution to that. Now, I'm sure you guys have much more, advanced, very good thinking in terms of solutions for how cities might address it. Probably they're going to be kind of expensive and take a lot of time. But in the meantime, why are we not at least thinking about something like this as a sort of short-term, temporary solution to, again, that helps address the fundamental issues, like we don't want people throwing trash down the sewers. I think that's kind of brilliant. And when was the last time we thought about a sewer grate as a creative opportunity? We think about statues, we think about walls for potential murals, but that, I think, is really well done. So again, maybe that is a creative, addition to some of the work that we add something like that to the mix to help raise awareness and maybe change the perspective. And to me, very much a love note. Dog parks are love notes, with apologies to those of you who own cats and birds and fish and ferrets. You don't walk your cat. And if you do, people think you're a little odd, right? No, we walk our dogs. And when we walk our dogs, we're actually out there using green space, interacting with the environment, interacting with each other, creating a sense of activity in a place, right? And dog parks are social. In fact, dog parks are probably the most social places in a city. People actually talk to each other at the dog park, right? Now, they may not know your name, but they know your dog's name. And eventually they'll get around to learning your name as well. And that's a little bit of social capital that didn't exist before. It's because the dog has essentially broken the ice and negotiated that encounter for you. Pretty cool. Side benefit. In a time when we still probably can't afford more police and more surveillance equipment in our communities, dogs and dog owners provide a sense of safety. And it's not because somebody has to own an attack dog or anything like that. No, but the fact is that we dog owners are out there at all hours of the day and night walking our dogs, creating what Jane Jacobs, the great urbanist, called the eyes of strangers on the street. There's nothing worse than walking down a completely empty street, right? We feel pretty exposed by that. But hey, if there's a dog and a dog walker out there, it's all good. So maybe there's some neighborhoods back home we'd like to see get better. Maybe it's as simple as a strategically placed little dog park. Maybe it's even simpler. It's one of those mitts on a stand and a place with a poop that basically says dogs are welcome. To me, it is amazing how dogs in cities humanize cities for the better. If you don't believe me, at dinner last night, a bunch of us were getting to know some people. Everybody pulls out their phone. Nobody shows pictures of their kids. Everybody shows pictures of their dogs. We've all done this, right? Dogs in cities. It is kind of amazing. In fact, I'm writing about this. I'm working on my 3rd book right now. Do you know there's a number of U.S. cities where dogs actually now outnumber children in cities? This is changing. This is changing the way we're, the necessary infrastructure to support that change. Kind of significant. So something to think about. Dogs in cities. This one is interesting. Rituals and traditions. Cities have them, families have them, schools have them. And I think some of them are some amazing love notes for their communities. And I think my very favorite actually comes from Providence, Rhode Island. And this is called Water Fire. And it was started like 25 years ago by the city, and they worked with an artist by the name of Barnaby Evans. Now, what was interesting about Providence is, like many industrial cities, in the 20th century, they industrialized their riverfront. In fact, they covered up, the river was covered up with like these massive steel plates in a lot of places. And if you didn't know there was actually a river there, you might not say, if you just drove through, it's like, is there a river in Providence? Yeah, there's a river in Providence there. So what they were trying to do was reconnect with the river. And of course, there's all kinds of development that is now happening, and a lot of cities are actually trying to address this. But Providence did it earlier, and I think in a really sort of beautiful way. What Barnaby did was actually very simple. Once they uncovered the river, he brought in these braziers, they anchored them in the middle of the river, they bring in cords of pine wood, and they light them on fire. It's water and fire. It is the most basic thing in the world, and it is absolutely magical. Because you go down there during a water fire event, smell that pine smoke, hear the crackle of that wood, see these great dancing shadows that are created all over downtown, the city there, because it's essentially like a bonfire on the river. And all of us, we have sat in front of a campfire or a bonfire and been absolutely mesmerized by the experience, right? There's something in our human nature that we can watch fire and be incredibly content. Well, imagine taking that idea to a municipal level and you have water fire. And they do about 24 of these every year. And a few years ago, I was lucky enough to participate in what they call a lighting ceremony. And sort of like the villagers out of a Frankenstein movie, we carried these torches from City Hall down to the waterfront, we put the torches into this urn, and from the urn, they lit water fire. Very cool. And this will always inform the way I think and feel about Providence. Now, I think the fundamental fact there that I think certainly relates to what you guys are talking about there is a desire to reconnect with their river, to reconnect with their water. And I think this is something that is fundamental to this idea of community, right? Even the most landlocked of communities have a relationship of some kind with water. Certainly you guys know this from a scientific level, but there's also, I think, this sort of humanistic and sort of, certainly an aesthetic level that goes on there as well. So how does something like this, which I think is a brilliant way to bring people back and re-engage them with this incredibly important feature that is there in the heart of their community? So maybe there's some creative ways that we might actually do this. I had to share this one as well, because this was kind of amazing. Columbus, Ohio. This is the Scioto River. And for those of you who might have known or knew Columbus, the Scioto River actually used to be this wide here. And in 2014, they did kind of an extraordinary thing. They actually narrowed the river because they said, you know what, this river is too wide. We're not really getting the most use out of it. So once they narrowed the river, they actually created this amazing green space, these walkways there in the heart of downtown Columbus. And the change is phenomenal. There from what it was before, which again, really wide river, I guess, I'm sure there's reasons for that, but narrowing the river, it actually creates this space downtown that people actually want or have a desire to be next to. And this sort of speaks to our nature. It was like, why do we want to be around water? We want to walk next to it, like this, the Dubuque River Walk there. Or we want to walk over it there in Des Moines. Or how about this one? I learned about this last night, the Charles City Whitewater Park. Any folks from Charles City here? I'm told this has had a pretty profound impact on your community since this was opened a few years ago. Again, people, they want to walk on it, they want to walk over it, they want to be near it, they want to play on it. People want to engage with their communities. And certainly water is one of those ways where we can literally do that. So I think the work that you guys do is incredibly important in creating this connection, this emotional connection with our places. This is an interesting one. Millennium Park in Chicago is a big, expensive love note. How many folks have been to Millennium Park in Chicago? Yeah, it's kind of amazing, right? This is Cloud Gate, locally known as the Bean. And the first time you approach the Bean, you're going to do this. You're going to find your own reflection. You're going to take your own picture. Selfie, right? Click. You'll take your friend's picture. Take this skyline picture, right? And then while you're doing that, you're seeing lots of people coming up and interacting with it, touching the art. Art you can touch, that's a little different, right? Because they're playing with it like a giant funhouse mirror. And that's essentially what it is. And then you look over your shoulder, and you see these, right? Those two water towers. And the water towers are actually covered in video screens. So these eyes will open, will smile at you. And then during the summer months, they have these water cannons that shoot water out onto the deck, creating what is essentially a giant above-ground pool. And on a typical summer day, you'll see hundreds of kids playing in that pool. Now, city making point number one that we'd all do very well to remember is when kids are happy, parents are happy, right? We know this, we feel this, and kids love these water features. Cities, not so much. They are kind of expensive, they always break down, and sometimes those darling children will do unspeakable things in there and somebody has to clean that stuff up. Now, I don't have a solution to that last bit, but I did take this picture in a little town outside of Pittsburgh. This is Braddock, Pennsylvania. It's about 5 summers ago, hot summer day, little downtown park, kids are playing, and here in the corner, that is a garden hose. I believe we have a tendency to overthink the solutions to our city's problems. Because the city manager's handbook says, oh, we want a splash pad, we want a water feature. costs this much money. It's like, I don't have that much money. Well, we'll try to find it in the budget next year. Meantime, too bad, so sad. What's wrong with going down to Home Depot, spending 20 bucks, buying a garden hose, and turning on the faucet? Nothing. In fact, there's everything right with that kind of solution. It says, hey, we're being financially responsible. We spent 20 bucks. We're being creative. And most importantly, we're responding to the wants and needs of our community. Cool. And too often I hear communities almost apologize for their garden hose solutions. They say, you know what, we wanted to do this, budget was tight, so we had to do that. It's like, no, you should be saying, you know what, we wanted to do this, budget was tight, but we were able to do this. And you should be trumpeting this as a triumph over adversity, which is exactly what it is. Never apologize for your garden hose solutions. They show you at your very best. Again, being financially responsible, creative, and most importantly, responding to the wants and needs of your community. So think about this. The next time you find yourself in that situation where you don't have all the budget that you'd like, and let's face it, when do we ever have as much budget as we'd like? Ask ourselves the question, what is the garden hose solution that, again, gets us down the road, allows us to respond to the wants and needs of our community? Garden hose solutions. I suspect many of you probably already are doing that kind of stuff. But again, you should be trumpeting those. Those are great, those are fantastic examples of you guys being creative and, again, responding to the wants and needs of your community. Boom. Play. Now remember I said we're in a relationship with our places? Well, think about the relationship that we have with other people. I think those unstructured, unplanned moments when we're hanging out with our friends and family at play, I think those are the bedrock of our relationships with other people. Well, we need opportunities to play with our communities, our cities as well. Certainly public art is one of those great ways where play can actually happen. I think the fact that we want to play with water, we want to engage with water, that is another way that can happen. So my partner Michelle and I were in Anchorage, Alaska. This would be about 6 Februaries ago, because Facebook told me this just the last month. It's like 6 years ago, you were in Anchorage, Alaska. Okay, that's cool. So we're in Anchorage, and we found this little downtown park, and these are the remnants of their holiday ice sculptures. Obviously still quite cold in Anchorage in February. So Michelle goes and sits down on the caboose over here, and this little girl in yellow walked up and goes, hey, you're in my spot. We had to move, and we move and we find this. Okay, so city making point number 2. You want people to make that face in your city, in your community. Because when people make that face in your community, good things are going to happen in your community. Not only are we going to go back and tell folks, hey, we had a great time in Anchorage, Alaska. We're going to put all kinds of fun stuff on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We're going to write some positive Yelp reviews. We're going to be in a good mood, and we're probably going to spend some money. And people don't make that face in your community when you fix potholes for them. No. They make that face in your community when you surprise and delight them. Surprise and delight, like fun, don't have to cost a whole lot of money, but they do need to be seen as legitimate objectives in the work that we do. Now think about that. When was the last time you went into work with the goal of surprising, delighting your audience, your customers, your constituents, your fellow citizens? Probably not often, but that's a good day to go to work. Today I shall surprise and delight the citizens of Iowa. It's like, okay, that's kind of fun. And again, it doesn't necessarily have to cost a whole lot of money. You know what she's sitting in? Frozen water. Frozen water, some creativity, some imagination, and thinking about the problem in a different way. Now, granted, frozen water is easier to come by in Anchorage, Alaska than it is in Florida, where we live. Nonetheless, there's all something lying around that if we thought about it in a different way, we might come up with some wildly fun and cool things that we could actually do with it there as well. And what might it look like if a city embraced this idea of surprise and delight? Well, it might look something like Greenville, South Carolina. Now, Greenville will make the argument that they are the best downtown in America, and they make a pretty strong case for it. This is their main street. It's got a fantastic tree canopy here. Both sides of the road, all kinds of local restaurants, local shops. You go down a few blocks here at the far end of this thing, there's this amazing park. This is Falls Park there in Greenville. This amazing footbridge that goes across it. It is fantastic there. This is so good, other cities go there to study it, right? Yet, amidst all this incredibly well done big stuff, and by big stuff, I do mean expensive stuff. The thing that surprised and delighted me and the story I tell to folks like you is actually something very, very small. It's actually the mice on Main. These little brass mice. And the story goes like 15 years ago, a high school student came to the mayor with this idea. He says, hey, Mr. Mayor, I want to do this scavenger hunt downtown. I want to cast these brass mice, I want to put them downtown and encourage people to sort of go and explore the city as they look for the mice. The mayor said, interesting. How much money do you need? The kid said like $1,200. And for $1,200, you bet, the mayor said sold. So now they cast the mice, they put them downtown, and you'll see people walking around downtown with these maps. They get the maps in the restaurants and shops, right? It says, okay, come to this particular street corner, turn 45 degrees, look up. Boom. And you'll hear kids and women and grown men squealing with delight once they've found one of these mice. And after you found one of these mice, you're looking everywhere for these damn things. You're like, oh, there's another one. And you find yourself looking at stuff you probably otherwise wouldn't have even bothered to look at. You know? And the mice, they're actually all very cute. They've all been given names. They've all been given a backstory. It's all been collected in this really cool children's book called The Mice on Main. That's awesome. So again, amidst all this incredibly well done, big, expensive stuff, my lasting impression of Greenville, and I'm certain I'm not alone in this, is actually something this small. So these little moments of surprise and delight, whimsy, if you will, playfulness, these things can make a huge difference in the way people fundamentally think about their community. So yeah, these little things, they do matter. I do recognize, however, that sometimes we got to go big. The Denver Convention Center. This is a piece of public art called I See What You Mean, but of course locally known as the Big Blue Bear. Now the Big Blue Bear is about 14 years old now, has become a very beloved piece of public art. But that wasn't necessarily always the case. And can you imagine the first time the artist comes into city council with that idea? He says, hey, I got an idea. I want to do this statue. It's going to be of a bear. It's going to be really, really big. And oh, by the way, it's going to be blue. I suppose that conversation goes over the first time the powers that could hear it. Seriously? Do you know how many potholes we could fix for the cost of that ridiculous bear? And therein lies the challenge. Yeah, the bear has a cost. And if you're one of those people who sees the world through that lens, if everything is about the cost of things, the pure financial accounting of things, then yeah, you can always justify not doing something by saying, you know what, we can always fix more potholes, which again is technically true. But in addition to having a cost, the bear has a value. And to me, the value of the Big Blue Bear is once you see the Big Blue Bear, you cannot unsee the Big Blue Bear. You will always remember it, and you will always associate it with Denver. And think about how many photographs people take of this thing every day. And every one of those photographs that goes out there onto YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, every one of those is a smile, is a postcard, is a love note from the city of Denver. That absolutely has value. You know, there's lots of people who want to hold, our elected officials' feet to the fire about the cost of things. The cost, the cost, the cost. Well, it seems like those people who know the cost of everything, they don't seem to understand the value of anything. Because things have a value beyond the purely financial. And if we want to live in the type of community that has room for things like beauty, art, great design, and big blue bears, we have to speak up and we have to fight for this stuff. And this is an argument we can win, absolutely. So the next time we're having this conversation, say, fine, let's talk about it. Let's talk about the cost, but then let's also talk about the value. And remember, things have a value beyond the purely financial. And if they really want to get snippy about this stuff, let's talk about the cost of ugly. Let's talk about the cost of boring. Because you bet those things have a cost. And I guarantee you, the people who are obsessed with cost have never thought about it in those particular terms. It's an argument we can win. It's an argument we need to win to build the kinds of communities that I know at heart we actually want to live in. Now, the ultimate, though, in terms of lovable cities are, of course, the people. They're the people that are desperately, passionately in love with their places. These people who will sometimes go above and beyond ordinary levels of citizenship and sometimes do extraordinary things for their places, not because they're paid to do it, but this is how they roll. This is how their sense of community, how their sense of creativity manifests in some amazing ways. I call these folks the co-creators, because they're essentially co-creating the experience of the city, of the community, along with the official folks. Folks like mayors and city councils, city managers, planners, architects, designers. It is their job to create the content that is the community. But then again, there are these unofficial folks who don't get paid to do this stuff, but they have an amazing impact on their places. Like my friend Bob Devin Jones here. Now Bob is the creative director of a small black box theater in downtown St. Petersburg where I live. And for those of us who live in St. Pete, we know how important Bob is to making St. Pete a great place to live, work, and play. But Bob doesn't show up on any city org chart. He's not one of the most powerful, most influential business people. No, none of that. But again, those of us who live there, we know how important Bob is to our community. Now, all of you know your community's version of Bob Devin Jones. Some of you might actually be your community's version of Bob Devin Jones in sort of your alter ego, co-creative secret life. It's like, that's cool. But the thing is because we see you around town and we see Bob at the coffee shop, there's still this notion that people have out there and they say, oh, that's just Bob being Bob. No, I got to tell you, Bob being Bob is extraordinary, and we need more of that. Because Bob does not see the problem the same way that the official folks do. And consequently, his solutions are going to be very different than the ones the official folks might actually be able to come up with. And we need that, there. Cities get the big stuff mostly right. We're very smart about that. Where the real opportunity lies is in this little stuff. The kind of stuff that percolates from the ground up, from people, from different actors who don't see the problem in the same way and consequently come up with these wildly different solutions. What you want to see happen is the good top-down stuff meets the interesting bottom-up stuff, and all of a sudden now it meets in the middle and people are going to say, hey, there's something going on here, and you can literally feel it. Now, I had to add this one, an Iowa example. And I met Andrew Anderson from Muscatine a few years ago. I actually met him in Iowa City, and I was fascinated by a project that he had done. Some of you might actually know this there. So Andrew was telling me about his community. He is an artist. He'd probably call himself more of a maker there. And he's telling me about muscatine. He says, I love my community. He says, but the thing is the folks in my community, they don't necessarily think they're very creative. He goes, I want people to believe something. I want them to believe something different. I want them to feel differently about themselves. So he said one day he was looking at the Mississippi River there in Muscatine, and for whatever reason, the idea of the Loch Ness Monster popped into his head. So he goes home, he starts creating this whole mythos of maybe this mythological monster that might have lived in the Mississippi River there near Muscatine for centuries. So he creates a Twitter account, Facebook account, all this stuff, and creates this whole mythology around this monster. And it builds and builds and builds, and finally in the summer of 2012, he debuts the Muscatine River Monster. It appears in the upper floors of this old hotel that had been converted to condos. So he's working with the developers, working with the owners there. And these arms, they have those fans in them, so they actually move in the wind. It's like, oh, that is so freaking cool there. And it was up for like a week, and people were buzzing about the monster. There was all kinds of press coverage around this. People wanted to come down and get pictures of it. And people were coming up to him during that week and asking him, he says, hey, we love the monster. Could we get it in our building? And he said he really hadn't intended this as anything other than a one-off, but he says, sure, why not? So now the monster's made the rounds. It's been in storefronts, it's been in the dorms of the community college, it's been in the public library, and it's even been in the 4th of July parade. I love this. I look at this, and I see this guy down here, there. It looks like he's taking a picture. And I hope what he's thinking is, you know what? One of us made that crazy thing. One of us. And here's a beautiful example of an artist, somebody who loves their community, has essentially held up a mirror to his community and says, you know what, all that you think you are, yeah, but you are something more. That is important. That is powerful. And what an unlikely vehicle to deliver that message. A monster, right? Nowhere in the city manager's handbook is there a page on monsters. I would worry if there was, right? But again, here's a great example of somebody not looking at the problem in the same way and coming up with a wildly different and creative solution to this. Any of you actually see the Muscatine River Monster? I know it made a tour around the state. Yeah, a couple people there. I think it was in the state capitol actually for a while as well. So yeah, I think this is amazing there. And definitely, and related to water. So there you go. This one's kind of fun. Check this out.
My name is Peregrine Church. I make things that make the world a more interesting place, like a rainwork. Rainworks are pieces of street art that only appear when they're wet, and they're messages or images designed to make people's rainy day a little bit better. Seattle is associated with rain, it's fair to say, and rainworks just all it needs to be is wet, so it's sort of the ideal Seattle art.
So the stuff that makes rainworks is biodegradable, environmentally friendly, and completely non-toxic.
The essential ingredient when making rainworks is a super hydrophobic coating.
Okay, let's see how it works on the never wetted pants and shirt. So you want me to start on the shirt, all right?
That is a chemical that when you put it on a surface will prevent that surface from getting wet.
What? What?
I was just browsing the internet one day and stumbled across a viral video, and the video showed like these really vivid images of like red wine pouring off a white shirt and chocolate syrup pouring off white shoes and people getting buckets of water thrown on them and they're like totally fine. And I'm like, well, that's really cool. What can I do with this? It's a spray-on substance, so it made sense. Like, what if you sprayed it through a stencil? So if you put it on concrete, well, ideally it'd be invisible. Instead of the concrete getting dark, the water will just roll right off it and it'll stay light colored. The contrast can be used to create an image. The very first one I did, it said stay dry out there, and had a bunch of raindrops falling in. It was on a bus stop. And now there's about 25 to 30 rainworks out there. There's a lily pad and pond with frogs hopping between them in Ballard. There's I Heart Rain in UW. At 4th and Bell it says, worry is a misuse of the imagination. There's Today's Weather, Rain in Fremont. There's Proud to be Rainy in Capitol Hill. There's Hopscotch at the Junction in West Seattle, and we want to make way more. I mean, it's gonna rain no matter what, so why not do something cool with it?
How fun is that? Now, I bet if we went back to our local municipalities and asked their public works folks about this stuff, they go, oh yeah, super hydrophobic coating? We've known about that for years. Maybe some of you actually known about that for years. But they never thought to do something like that with it. And that, again, is the genius of these co-creators. The people who don't see the problem, don't even see the materials in the same way, and come up with these wildly different approaches to something in our communities. These co-creators absolutely do matter, and they are in every community, big or small. So maybe what happens is the right co-creator comes along at the right time, in the right place, with the right problem, and you might actually have a game changer for your community. And that's exactly what happened in Grand Rapids, Michigan. So in January 2011, Newsweek magazine published a list that no city in America wanted to be on. It's a list of America's 10 most dying cities. Dying cities. It was based upon population loss between 2000 and 2010. And Grand Rapids ends up on that list. Now, if somebody says something bad about our city, what's our typical response? Like, oh, let's go talk to the marketing folks. Let's get the PR team working. Get the word out. We are not a dying city. Okay, well, you know, think back. 2011, money's awfully tight for most communities. And Grand Rapids didn't have any extra money lying around for new ad campaigns. Says, okay, what are we going to do? We're going to live with this moniker of being a dying city? Well, in walks the guy in the green t-shirt. His name is Rob Bliss. He's 22 years old at the time, and he did social media for one of the local TV stations. So he comes into the powers that be and says, hey, I got an idea. We should do a lip dub. I'm sure somebody said, a lip what? He goes, a lip dub. It's lip syncing to a popular song. Now we could do the Iowa Watershed, the Iowa Water Conference lip dub here right now. We'll bring up the lights, we'll get out some music, I'll get out my iPhone, we'll turn on the thing, we'll boom, 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 you guys start singing, 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 done. Lip dub. Might be a little boring, might be a little on the nose, but it would be a lip dub nonetheless. Rob said no. Let's make it big. We'll make it epic. We'll shoot it downtown, we'll get everybody involved, use YouTube and Facebook and Twitter, it'll go viral, it'll be epic, it'll be great. I suppose that conversation goes over the first time the powers that be hear that. Lip what? Using Yoo-hoo, Facebook, Twitter, don't know about that. Viral sounds bad. By the way, son, how old are you? Have you ever done this before? So let's face it, Rob does not look like your traditional city solutions provider. He's not wearing a suit, he's not wearing a tie. And more importantly, he doesn't have a stack of reports that say, hey, if we do this, we have these very predictable outcomes on the other end. No, none of that. He's 22 years old, he's got an idea and an enthusiasm, and he thinks he can pull it off. Now, maybe because they saw something in Rob, maybe because they had to. I suspect there's actually a combination of both. The city did decide to move forward. It says, look, we really don't have any extra money, but we can provide police and fire service for you. We can help close off some roads downtown. And they helped connect him with some private money. And in May of 2011, they shot the Grand Rapids lip dub. And the whole thing is like 9.5 minutes long. I've got a little excerpt I'm going to show you. But it's this amazing community response being declared a dying city by this outside entity. The whole thing, you know, like I said, 9.5 minutes, but the key thing to remember is it involves 5,000 people. It takes place over a 1-mile circuit all throughout downtown Grand Rapids. And remember, it's shot as one continuous videotape. Check out the Grand Rapids lip dub.
Bye, bye, Miss American Pie. Drove my Chevy to the levee, but the levee was dry. And good old boys are drinking whiskey and rye, singing, this will be the day that I die. This will be the day that I die. Can you help me out a little on that? Falling fast, and landed foul on the grass. The players tried for a forward pass with a jester on the sidelines in a cast. Now the halftime air was sweet perfume while the sergeants played a marching tune. The flames climbed high into the
Remember,
night.
everything is cooler with pyro, no matter what the fire marshal tells you.
I saw Satan laughing with delight today.
They said they picked this song because it's about life, death, and renewal. That's because I think we know the words, right? At least to the chorus. It was interesting, they did 5 takes of this, and the 5th and final take was the one that they actually used.
This will be the day that I die. They were singing what? This American heart. The Chevy to the levee, but the levee was dry. The good old boys were drinking.
Here's the payoff as well.
Singing, this will be the day that I die.
So that video has been viewed over 5 million times on YouTube. That story got picked up by national and international media. Rob was interviewed on Good Morning America, and Grand Rapids ends up getting tens of millions of dollars worth of positive brand exposure because they're willing to listen to a 22-year-old kid about a weird, wacky, untested idea. What's the lesson for your community? Well, probably not to go out and do another lip dub. It's been done. It's been done really, really well. But in the spirit of the lip dub, let's recognize that the solutions to some of our problems may not look like any solution we've ever seen before. Again, nowhere in the city manager's handbook is there a page on lip dubs. And let's also recognize that the solutions providers may not be the ones we're used to dealing with. They could be younger, they could be older, they could have the hats on sideways, the pants down to here, the piercings, the tattoos, and how about those freaky earlobes go all the way down to here? And we as the adult in the room need to be okay with that, right? Because it'd been a real shame if the powers that be said to Rob, thanks Mr. Bliss, we'll go talk to the marketing folks, we'll be fine. I don't know. I don't think we'll ever really know. But I suspect the real outcome of that is Rob probably would have said, you know what, heck with this. I will take my talents elsewhere. And that would have been real loss for the city of Grand Rapids. Because he doesn't just show up to do this lip dub thing. No, he had an interesting track record with the city. In fact, his earliest project with the city, he organized pillow fights in the park with the city, right? Which led him to doing this giant water slide in the heart of downtown Grand Rapids, which led him to the art prize competition for which they made 100,000 paper airplanes, and they took them off the roof of the tallest building in downtown Grand Rapids while the symphony orchestra played below. And that sets him up perfectly in many ways to be a hero for his community with the lip dub. Can you imagine the first time he comes into the permit department, slides that permit across the table and says, okay, what can I help you today, son? Permit, please. Okay, what are we doing? Pillow fights in the park, please. Pillow fights in the park, why did anybody want to do that? Or pillow fights in the park, what kind of city do you think we are, son? But they didn't. It says, pillow fights in the park? Sure, cool, fine, go have fun. And they did. Rob and his friends went and had fun, they got some experience and said, hey, that was cool. Let's do something else. And they did, and they iterated. And 2 or 3 iterations down the road, they had a game changer for their community because somebody didn't step on that weird little project early on when they had the opportunity. That notion of citizens wanting to do something positive for their communities is a precious, precious thing. And we as the powers that be need to do everything in our power to not squelch that enthusiasm. And most of the time cities don't squelch it out of any sort of sense of animus or anything like that. But you know what? Cities and bureaucracies, they're kind of big and they're kind of clumsy. And if something doesn't fit neatly into some bucket that we're familiar with, our reflexive answer is to say no. Well, I'll tell you what, no is a lazy answer. So maybe some of us might actually be sitting in some decision-making capacity at some point in the future. And maybe there's somebody who's there pitching an idea, and they don't have all the polish, they don't have all the language, but they're excited about something. You might remember, hey, that guy Peter was talking about this stuff. Maybe you say, you know what, let's go chat in my office. Not quite sure what you're on about, but clearly you're excited. Maybe we can figure out a way to maybe make this happen. Because again, when citizens actually want to get in the game and be part of the solution in any capacity, that is a good, good day. Because most citizens, they don't believe they have any power in all this stuff. Most citizens believe placemaking, community building is somebody else's job. And consequently, they sit back and they wait for somebody else to make the community better for them. And as hardworking as we are, as I know you guys are, that can still be a long wait. Well, most people need to believe something different. They need to be part of this solution. Most people, again, think community building is all about big stuff. Roads and bridges and schools, watersheds, things like that. It's like, I can't do any of that. And again, they sit back and they wait for somebody else to do the hard work. Well, community building is also little stuff. It could be a dog park. It could be a community garden or a weirdo backyard festival that involves you, me, and our crazy neighbor that we do for no other reason than it amuses us. That has value, and that is city building. And again, more people need to believe this stuff. And I think the examples that these guys share, do, they empower us. These folks like Bob Devin, like Andrew, and Rob Bliss, they're like the spice in what makes a great dish. You don't have to have a lot of spice to make for a flavorful dish, but you have to have some, otherwise it's a bland dish. Well, every community needs some spicy people as well. The ones who don't look at the problem in the same way and aren't willing to settle for the same old solutions as well. Spicy people make for better communities there as well. And again, they are in every community. Again, I suspect there's some spicy people here. Maybe you guys want to shake up the establishment a little bit in what you do, maybe both professionally or personally. I would encourage you to follow that muse moving forward. And I think, the way I will sort of culminate and bring this all back to this nature of water. Fundamentally, somebody said, you're not a water guy. And I kind of made the joke, well, I'm, 90% water, so I guess I am kind of a water guy. I guess we're all sort of water guys and girls here at heart. But there is something about our human nature, I said it before, about fire, but it's also about water. We want to relate to our natural environment. And if you guys can help us do that, now I know your job is to make the water clean and safe, there, and to manage that, to preserve the environment. That is great. But I think when we have the opportunity, where we elevate this conversation, is how do we make it relatable? How do we make it, so that somebody actually cares about this stuff in a different way? Of course it has to be clean and safe. That's our fear. But we expect the water. We expect you guys and our communities to take care of that. We expect that. Where we have the real opportunity is to go above and beyond that. How do we make the watershed personal? How do we make it fun? How do we make it playful? How do we allow people to interact with that? And by asking these questions, and maybe even by asking a guy like me to come and talk to you guys about this, we're challenging you to go above and beyond what we're expecting to do. And again, we're expecting you guys to do your job and to do it well. But maybe the next phase of doing it well is layering in this different conversation about the nature of water and our community. It was right there in the title, folks. This should not be a surprise. Our watershed, our community. They're absolutely inextricably linked. And there is an opportunity there, I think, to make both of them better, to make both of them not only, sustainable. Of course, that's a good goal. Livable, that's a good goal. Let's make them even higher. Let's make it lovable. Let's make the type of community that grabs you by the heart and refuses to let you go. It's the kind of community I want to live in. It's the kind of community I know you guys want to live in. That is the kind of community that has to be built in a very different way. And it starts by asking different questions and coming together and thinking about the very nature of the things that we ordinarily do in maybe a slightly different way. So hopefully I've given you guys something to think about. And I've certainly given you something maybe to talk about at lunch. Like, did you see the weird guy talking about love this morning? Yeah, he's kind of funny. So there. But I hope you guys had taken away something interesting about this because, again, I think what you guys do is incredibly important and fundamental to all of our communities. So thank you guys very, very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Peter. Absolutely a new way to look at things.